So because I've wasted a lot of time, I'll try to see if I can do as much as possible. So that was a welcome. And I'm going to be focusing on Rwanda. For those who don't know where Rwanda is in Africa, somewhere here. I don't know if you can see it.
MJ, could you put the presentation on a presentation mode so that it takes up more of the screen?
Oh, where's that?
Can be like the small present. Wait.
The bottom right and near the sound, MJ?
Press F5.
Yes, next to the minus of the sound, like no, the size, I think.
Press F5.
Okay. That's better. Oh, thank you. Oh my God, I didn't even think that I'm coming to be educated and within 5 minutes. Right, so Rwanda is here. So in the West, it's a DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda in the north, and Tanzania in the east, and Burundi in the south. And that's the president of Rwanda. He's the fourth president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and he came into power in 2000. In 2000. Now, let me go back to Rwanda first. Rwanda is landlocked, therefore not vulnerable to slavery, but was a target of colonization, first by German in 1884, and it became part of the German East Africa in 1899. Then after the First World War, Rwanda was invaded by Berlin in 1916. Now, colonization had different problems, but yet at the same time, similar problems to slavery, such as displacement, loss of identity. The whites, who in Rwanda are referred to as Mazungu or similar to that, are still considered superior and blacks inferior. Some of the culture is seen as the primitive or dangerous. How is this belief in white superiority experienced in the social unconscious of Rwanda? Can we find words for it? And if we can, how are the interpretations tolerated? How does the matrix of the, how does it influence the matrix of the group? What is group matrix? James Anthony states that it is a creative matrix with unconscious and pre-conscious components, intermingling primary processes, visual stimulations, admixtures of rationality and irrationality, realism and irrealism, regression, following progression. And I always like the idea of regression, but the hope that you will be progressing. And when I read that again, I was thinking of the large group that can lead to progression and not to stay stuck in that same position where things are difficult, where there's conflict. Now, the other significant event in Rwanda was the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. So on the 6th of April, 1994, the then president, excuse the pronunciation, Juvenal Habyarimana's plane was shot down as it approached the Kigali airport. His death became the catalyst of the Rwandan genocide. In 100 days, over 800,000 Tutsis and moderate number of Hutus were killed, leaving many children without families, many wives widowed, some people significantly maimed. This is the social matrix shared by most Rwandans. Our trainees, interpreters, were children at the time of the genocide and experienced the same trauma as the people they are now working with, the genocide survivors and perpetrators, struggling to move on, and that is a challenge. So we are still struggling to cope with the debris from slavery and colonization era, and they have to deal with that plus their own history of trauma. Our trainees show a hunger for learning, and their strength and the stamina is great, but the most authentic strength is in their ability to be vulnerable. And our main challenge as trainers is to help them care for themselves without feeling that they are being selfish and without projecting their own vulnerabilities on their clients, whom I shall be referring to as benefactors, because that is the term used in Rwanda. We will look at the same, at some of our trainees, at some of the work our trainees do with the support of non-governmental organizations, NGOs across the country. But the main NGOs involved with the training are SAFE and AVEGA. Although Rwanda shares a traumatic experience, there exist significant differences, splits, subgroups, such as victim versus perpetrators, women, men, colonizers, colonized, refugees, and those who went away during genocide, and those who stayed. Some of these dynamics around these differences are easy to talk about. However, there are other significant differences that are more difficult even to acknowledge, let alone to talk about, such as the different in tribal identities, say the Tutsi and the Hutus, because Rwanda is trying to build a nation of equality for everyone. So every Rwandan is just Rwandan, not a Tutsi or a Hutu. This unification is strengthened by the fact that Rwandans have one main language, Kinyarwanda. In my own country, Zimbabwe, we have different tribes and we speak different languages. For example, Shona and Ndebele. And within the same language, let's take Shona, there are dialects. So in Shona, you have the Zezurus, the Karangas, the Manikas, and the Ndawus. And sometimes within those dialects, it's difficult to understand each other. Some of these tribal identities evoke mistrust, ending with the fighting about who is more superior. For example, the Shona see themselves as more superior than the Ndebeles. And within the Shona themselves, there's also the fight about superiority. For example, the Shona, the Zezurus see themselves as more superior, and they would look down at the Manikas, whom they look down at and say that they are too polite to be effective. Now, tribal wars are scattered all over our history, but there is but when there's a common enemy, for example, the whites, Mzungu, the tribes unite to fight the common enemy. But in the absence of a common enemy, tribal differences become more pronounced. So I'm very interested how Rwanda's way of involving, how Rwanda's way of solving the tribal wars by becoming one tribe works. Rwanda is also developing and becoming the African country most people now want to invest in. So I'm interested to see how all these changes, which will be brought by other international tribes, will affect Rwandans' culture. Now, Harold Best states that while diversity in language, collective historical memories, customs, and behavior patterns enrich the group matrix, it also possesses the challenge to communication, attitudes to openness, in the group are colored by the history of exposure to persecutory and traumatic experiences and the transgenerational transmissions of victimhood arising from a history of massive social trauma. And these are occasionally expressed through silence and secrecy in the group. A phenomena which can be understood in their history, social and political interpersonal context. Within Chinya Rwanda, there is a powerful different language, the nonverbal language experience in silence, secrecy, and the ambiguities of proverbs. How do all these challenges challenge the basic assumptions of group analysis? As if these challenges are not enough, just before coronavirus, COVID-19 arrived, Rwanda suffered from serious floods, which destroyed some of the homes, offering further challenges to the group analysis framework. Can a group member offer a home to a now homeless fellow group member? This challenge was compounded a few weeks later by COVID-19, forcing the world to stand still. Will the trainers, the trainees, and the interpreters welcome the creative thinking? The question is, are the trainers, trainees, interpreters ready to somersault through all these challenges and cut through to the ribbon at the finishing line? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is MJ. I'm a group analyst and one of the trainers on the foundation and intermediate course in group analysis. I'm also an author, and I've written 2 poems, My Grandmother, My Heroine, and then the second one is Children of the States, which looks at the grandmother's role and how social services is taking over and causing more pain and havoc. And I'm also the creator of the Save Our Youth Anti-Knife Culture Formula. And today we are just going to focus on finding ways for it. And I've started off by posing some questions, which I hope that I will be able to address some of them. Now, I'll start by, let me take you to March 2014. I got a call from Justin asking me if I would like to join him and Anne on a project to run a tester workshop in group analysis in Rwanda. For me, that was a no-brainer. I've always wanted to work with fellow Africans because I live in Surrey, and I'm lucky if I get one Black person in any of my groups, be it training groups or private groups. And at that time, I was up to my armpits with the racist mark, because the UK can be very racist, and the racism in UK can be cruel and soul destroying. So working in Africa would help me reconnect with what was good and important about being Black and an African. So this venture promised both professional and personal growth, not just as a Black token, but as a Black role model. Following the call, I met Rick, I was sold, and he explained about the program and that it was being sponsored by SAFE, which is the Survivor for Rwandan Genocide Fund, and Avega Agahozo, an organization which supports genocide widows. Justin, whom I thought at that time was a nice gentleman, had already recruited Anne Morgan, who recommended me to him. He did not have to explain who Anne Morgan was, because I had met Anne Morgan in Dublin symposium, GASi symposium, and I had been to enough GASi symposium to know that who you are drew a crowd or left you isolated and exposed. I was not known, and those who had heard about me were misinformed. So I was destined to have very few attendees. Anne and I were in the same workshop slots, and I was presenting after Anne. Anne Morgan was a name that drew a crowd. She was a crowd magnet. After her presentation, some people started getting up to leave, but Anne managed to nail them down onto their chairs, which meant that I had a good number of people to attend my presentation. And at that time, I really appreciated it because I was new, feeling fragile and sensitive to rejection by numbers, unlike now when I'm old and immune. So my association with Anne was positive and full of maternal love. And I knew that between Anne and Justin, I would be safe. And that was important for me because of the racial bruising I had suffered. So we worked on preparing the program, which was a 5-day program. And it was quite interesting because we had to do it over on Zoom. No, it was before Zoom, on the WhatsApp. And it was always interesting how if you sent a message to Anne and Justin at the same time, Anne would get the message long before Justin, who is in the same country with me, would get it. And the first group was a group of Avega psychologists and social therapists, and it was a tester. Now, where we're going is Ramagwana, which is here. But when we get to Rwanda, first of all, we go to Kigali and spend a few days there. So the way we worked our program was that we arrive in Rwanda a week before training, so that we spent time just traveling around Rwanda so that we could get an idea of Rwandan culture. And then at the end of the week, we come back again to Kigali in order to go to Ramagwana. And Ramagwana is a very beautiful training center, which belongs to Avega. And Avega was formed in 1995 by 50 widows who had lost their families in the 1994 genocide. Agahoza means dry one's tears. And Avega's aim was really to help the widows and orphans by supporting them to improve their living conditions by working together and supporting each other to fight for their rights and justice. So while we didn't have a formal we didn't have a formal entry, most of our participants were from nursing background, psychology, social work, medicine, and counseling. And the training was going to be in English, but most participants spoke Kinyarwanda or French, and a small number spoke English, and a few could understand English, but they couldn't speak it. So we were going to work with the interpreters. But because we were such a good team, we decided that we were going to learn Kinyarwanda before we go there, so that at least we can talk about the basic things. And we managed to find Jerome, who was in Kigali. So we used to practice it on WhatsApp. And from his voice, we were so scared of him because he was so strict. And even WhatsApp would stand at attention when Jerome spoke. And he would give us homework and make sure that we did our homework. And we'll be going there trembling, if you haven't done your homework. And then when we went to Kigali, we arranged to meet with him in Kigali, and we met him, and we were expecting to meet this dragon of a man. And when he came, it was just Jerome. Just look at him. So it was really a big shock in terms of how our imagination had worked. And there's something about Rwanda and its youth, which I shall come back to. But I think seeing him, it made us relax. And up to now, we still are struggling to learn Rwanda. But I say that it's not our fault, because if you learn a language, you need to keep on speaking in that language. And between the three of us, we are very competitive. Anne and Justin and I, we are really, really competitive. And Justin is very good with languages. So he learned the Rwanda quicker than us. But then Justin also had been in the Rwanda and other places and learned Swahili, which made it easier for him to learn Rwanda. So in order to deal with our own envy, we used to say that he was the teacher's pet rather than he was very good at it. So our first visit, if I can just go back again to the map. Our first visit was here in Butare. So from Kigali to Butare, which is now called the Huye. There we went to see the Avega widows. Here I became aware of my first challenge. I looked like a Rwandan woman, and most people thought I was, and greeted me with warmth and familiarity by wanting to engage in a conversation with me in Rwanda. Their disappointment with me was very clear, and they lost interest in me. However, I would like you to keep in mind this familiarity and the similarity, because it will come up again. Anne and Justin were greeted with respect, which then grew into excitement and maintained. And Justin had a better Rwanda vocabulary, which made it even better. And he spoke French, and most of them also spoke French, which was even better. Anne had this sense of seniority, which automatically commanded respect. And of course, then both of them were Wazungus, so they had extra respect. They got extra respect from that. Now, back to the genocide widows, they talked about their agricultural project, which is what some of our trainees do. They run agricultural programs and help their benefactors to work out what project they can get into. So we were concerned a bit about that we were introducing group analysis, and how is that going to match with the need to be practical and to offer practical help. And when they finished talking about that, then they went to talk about then their relationships with each other, because do some of the projects. And it was quite interesting for me, because they started talking about genocide, and they were talking it with so freely. And I had agonized when I was preparing my training material. I'd agonized about using the right words, and I decided that I'm not going to use genocide because it might sound insensitive. And then, so with me, I think there was something which I learned from that the field trips were really important, because they gave me a good idea of how to pitch what I'm teaching. And after that visit, I had to go back to the drawing board and rewrite the whole thing again, and sift through all my political correctness, and got rid of them. And then the other thing which was also striking was that after a group, they always danced. And either they did a dance or they did mindful exercises. And I was trying to think, how does that tie in with the group analysis? Because you can imagine after your small group, you all stand up and start dancing. But they explained that because they are aware that the trauma is absorbed in the body, sitting and talking about it would leave them traumatized. So they needed to get up and dance and get rid of it. Which I then wondered what group analysis would say about that. Then after the dancing, and one of the ladies invited us to her home. She was one of the widows, that lady. And it was quite humbling seeing her, because she then explained to us that she had 6 children, and all her children died during the genocide, and her husband also died, but she was pregnant. So she was left pregnant, and that's how the daughter survived. And what came really to mind was how the genocide continues to have an impact on people, and particularly in terms of mental health. And I like this photo because the cultural thing at that time, in my own culture, is that the women, they sit on the floor and the man sit on the stool. And Anne should be sitting on the floor. And so but the funny thing with the African culture, I don't know whether it's the same with Rwanda, is that once you are a certain age, you are excused from all those things. You rise in your rank. So Anne is sitting where she's supposed to be sitting because of the rank of a woman. Now, our first workshop after the field was quite interesting, particularly for me, because this was my small group, and I only had one white person. The rest were Black people. And it was my first experience of being in such a group, because in Sari, I'll be lucky if I get interesting to see my own reaction and how I work with the Black people, compared to when I'm in London, and how I work with the white people. There is a story. But I noticed that if I go to Rwanda, when I come back, I really had to do mental rinsing of my head to tune in to being back here, because it has to be a different way of being. And I know that there was one visit when I didn't do it properly. And I went to the group. I think I only had a day in between. So it was like coming out of a group of Black people into a group of white people, and then forgetting that the language is completely different. That is the current way the group is, because the white person, she was a researcher, and she had just come for the tester group. But after that, all the groups, they are of just Black people. And it's really an interesting way. And also working with the interpreter. So that is the interpreter's chair. The way he sits, he's slightly out of the group. And normally he's on the side where which you hear better. So he stays there in that, on my left, but slightly out of the group so that he can whisper without having to speak too loudly. You can ask me questions as we go if you need to. And that's the large group. Now, the thing with the large group is that normally it happens towards the evening. And sometimes in one particular, in that the group was talking about the witchcraft. It's Michael disaster, but the group was really engaged in the discussion. And I tried to say, can we, but the discussion was interesting. Leave the room because everybody was now scared. So we're sitting there. Share their rooms with other people. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't have anybody to share the room with. One of the trainees suggested that we had to have the prayer, and that is how we could leave the room. Now, the group dancing, there was a video on it, but all my videos are not behaving themselves, so I'll just have to talk you through. Now, the seminars are held in this large room, so it's almost a horseshoe. Mm-hmm. And the trainers are at the, whoever is presenting is at the front. And again, it's working with the interpreters. I'm really totally lost with my time because I need us to look. Did you all get the proverb paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So
Yes.
whoever is teaching will be at the front with their interpreter. Let me just, I've just taken one shot. I like this shot because I think there was a time I said something in group analysis about you can't see me, you can only see my teeth. And here I'm not even smiling, so which means that you can't share. And my interpreter, because he's smiling, you can see his teeth. And I think people were offended by that. And I was saying, but that is the reality of a Black person. So what? Get over it. Now, we work with the interpreters, so each one has got their own interpreter. And again, that can be quite competitive. Now, in this one, I chose, because I was going to play one of the videos, so they were talking on attachment, so I'd chosen to talk about attachment, but I can't play the video, so that is disappointing. But we felt that attachment was very important in Rwanda, considering the history. So I would present and my interpreter will be interpreting. And in that situation, Anne and Justin, their interpreters don't have to speak because we are speaking in English. And it was, of course, on the attachment theory. And then they break into small groups and discuss in the groups. But the small groups, they vary into work groups. And if they are work groups, then they become 3 groups because then they can have more time in their work groups. There was also a role play which was really beautifully done, which would have demonstrated something. Now here's a work group. So in the work group, that's why you can see on the wall, there's the charts there. The work group are mainly for supervision and things like that. So when somebody is giving, is talking about their group, then I do make notes and then put them on the wall for the rest of the week, which makes it a bit easier when we come back to reflect on it. Social dreaming is normally led by Anne, which is also quite a very good, interesting group. And one of the things which happened during the field trip was that I had a very, very vivid dream, you know, the paralysis dreams, where you feel as if a witch is sitting on your chest and you can't breathe, you can't get up. And I remember that because with the three of us, what we normally do is every morning we talk about our dreams, so that, I hope my internet is not playing up, so that we can then try to think what are we absorbing or what are we learning from it. So it was a dream which happened just before we started training. We're still on a field trip, and we went to this hotel, which really felt very uncomfortable when we arrived. And I asked it to be in the middle room. So I went into the middle room, but then I had that dream. And in the morning, I really couldn't talk about the dream to Anne and Justin because they are white. And I think my fear was that it would ruin our relationship, because if they try to interpret it in a Western way, it would annoy me. But in the end, we were able to talk about what was the possible, why it happened in that particular place. And we had just, because we did a lot of reading around Rwanda and watched the hotel Rwanda. And I think in my mind, I was also aware of how much violence had happened in the hotels. And that was one explanation. But what we learned from it was that maybe talking about trauma is not as easy as we thought it was, because we felt that the trainees are taking their time to talk, because most of the time they would speak about their benefactors, but they wouldn't want to speak about themselves. But being in a position where I really was so scared to speak, I began to understand something about how difficult it might be for them. So finding words is not as easy as we sometimes think it is. Of course, after a hard day's work, then we chill out. But the point is that we don't actually chill out, because when we go out to sit out, we are still working. And when we are in Rwanda, we are working all the time. From the minute we wake up, breakfast is about dreams, lunchtime is about reflection. And then we have our meetings with the interpreters also at lunchtime, just in case there's something which would have happened in the small group which they need help with. And one of the incidents which happened in the tester was we had a crisis in one of the large groups. And at the end of it, we decided that we are not going to have a large group on the last day. And we began to think more carefully about the fact that this is a traumatized community, and we need to be more careful in terms of how we manage the separation, how we manage saying goodbye, and so forth. So what we then did was that on the last day, instead of having a large group, we have a self-evaluation where the students talk about their individual experience of the block and what they're taking with them. So it can be an object, or they can take a leaf or a cup or whatever, which represents what is staying behind with them. And then they go into a group also, and then they do application, which is looking at the themes covered during that block and how it's applied to Rwanda. So each work group then comes and demonstrates that. I don't know if there's any, can we go into discussion? Because I'm aware of time. Can we go into discussion a bit about the proverbs, what you made of them? You can unmute yourself, isn't it?
Yes, they can unmute themselves.
Thank you. I don't know if you heard what I said. Am I frozen?
No.
No, no.
Oh, it's you practicing silence on me. It's difficult to tell.
But the next slide you had coming up, which was about working with the victims and perpetrators, it was sort of, that's next. But then you've stopped.
Okay. I'm aware that one of the things which was, we are finishing at 1:30, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of me which just wants to see if we can do a few minutes of the proverbs, and then I can go back to the slides.
I mean, MG, it's so impressive. I think that we stayed without words, at least me. But I wanted to ask you how often, how many blocks you have during the year?
We go in July and November, so it's 2 blocks. And the training is 2 years. Now, the training started off as a foundation training. And after that, then because the trainees, they asked if they could have something more. So we came up with an intermediate training, but we now combine the intermediate and the foundation. So they meet in most of the groups, except the theory. That's where the difference is. So Anne takes the foundation and I take the intermediate, and Justin goes between the two of us. The intermediate, they are expected to run a group. So when they started, then we have the supervision over the phone or on Zoom, which is once a fortnight, which is interesting because my group wanted to have it before they go to work. So in winter, it means I have to wake up at 5 to do it, but it's worth it.
I wanted to ask about the this idea of sorry, political correctness. You know, you were saying you had to go back and redo your preparation because you thought, you know, that it wouldn't perhaps be authentic. But I was thinking about your anxiety about the kind of political correctness of group analysis, you know, worried about whether it was okay to dance at the end. Because it was around in yesterday's, I was at the decolonizing group analysis, and I just wondered, you know, about that. How do you sort of adapt, not just impose something, but how do you use the principles of group analysis in a way that feels appropriate to the setting, and whether there is a sense of constraint? And
I think it's more to do with being open and honest about it. And I know that particularly with when we had floods,
yeah,
and one of the group member was offered accommodation by another.
yeah,
I know that there was a concern whether they are breaking a rule.
yeah, yeah.
My feedback to them, it was also with the COVID, because the concern was people were not eating. So how can I find food for them? And some of the trainees were actually buying the food themselves and then tell the people that, you know, the organization has bought food for you. But then felt, could they talk about it in supervision or not? But my take on it is that you are the one in the situation. Do what you think is best.
Right.
Then bring it to the supervision, and then we can begin to unpick it.
Yeah.
But trust yourself, because I can tell you what to do, but I'm not in the situation.
Yeah, yeah.
MJ, I really liked the presentation. I'm from India and I am just starting off my training. I've just joined the foundation course, training for group analysis in India this year. And we're doing it online on Zoom. So when you're talking about waking up that early to do your supervision group, I'm already thinking about how we've all been tying up together because our instructors are in UK and in like different spaces, and I think about how what you've presented is helping me keep an open mind about how I can adapt what I learned from the course to my work. Because even just within the cultural setup that I am in, there are so many subsets that it is impossible for me to always come from a place where I feel like one with the group, or where I know that I share an understanding that is foolproof. And when you spoke about your experience with the group of widows that you met there and what that was like for you, it helped me remember something, that even though I've grown up here, there are so many subsets to the culture that I exist in, that every time I go in, I have to be so aware of what I'm taking from my training versus what I can learn from the group. And I think that really stood out for me.
Okay, thank you.
MJ, I was looking at the proverb that speaks about secrets, and thinking that when you were trying to be politically correct and not use the word genocide, they were using that, and how does the I think the Rwandan proverbs are powerful. How does it affect the work or inform the work? Yeah,
I think when we started off, there was confusion between what is secrets and what is the confidentiality.
Yeah,
because they were seen as the same, so we had to work on what is the difference. And most of the time, I think the thing I like about Rwandan students is that they are very, very open. They are very polite, but they are very, very open, which really makes a difference. And some of it is also accepting that maybe I don't have all the answers, but the answers can come out from other people. So it is about having a dialogue and trying to make sense of what it is. Particularly with the program, because I didn't find them as difficult to understand, because I think I have a similar culture, which made it a bit.
So there's somebody having the music on. Is it possible to mute it? Because it's really hard for me to follow.
Yeah.
If there's another noise, because the technique is difficult for me. Thank you, whoever.
Actually, I would suggest you to mute yourself when you're not talking. This way, the only person unmuted is the one that it's talking, and it's better for everyone.
okay.
But is to remember to unmute before you speak. I just wondered what the trainees from Rwanda have to say, because it will be good to hear your voices. Dear Gina, I know you're there. And I think also the students from South Africa, because it's I just feel that we haven't heard enough of your voices.
Yes, hi, MJ. My name is Mutudi. I'm in South Africa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I just wanted to say it's inspiring work that you're doing, and it made me remember about our context in South Africa. That in actual fact, and I think Patricia and Monica from Cape Town are in this forum, so they can also say the group analysis. It's concentrated only in the two biggest cities, in Joburg and in Cape Town. And I was wondering, or actually I was thinking about what you have been doing, and that it brings an inspiration to for us in Africa to take group analysis a little bit further, and as a result, see how much it can be challenged and also challenge other people. Because I think from your presentation, what I took was how the setting provides different kind of challenges that sort of reforms our understanding of group analysis, and somehow challenges the way we have been thinking about it. And I think you have given a number of examples about the different things that were happening in Rwanda. And I was, for example, thinking about how different it will be if we were taking group analysis to rural areas where the main language is not English, and the challenges are not always similar to what we experience in the cities. But well done on your work. Thanks.
Thank you. I think for me, it's really important that you don't lose yourself. And I think group analysis allows that. I remember when I qualified, because in my culture, when you come of age or your first salary, you're supposed to buy something for your parents. In my case, I bought for my grandparents. And so when I qualified, I wanted to mark the fact that I was now a group analyst and not a trainee. And I felt that I needed to buy something for my trainers. But if you look at it in terms of group analysis, then they will say, what are you doing? It's not done. And I had to spend some time talking about it in my small group, so that I'm sure that I'm not giving them a grenade and leaving, not saying what I want to say. So I actually made a decision about what I was giving them, and I wanted to give them something I was taking with me. So for example, I gave Harold Bear, who was my supervisor, I gave him little drums because he was my supervisor. And what they stood up for me was what I got out of supervision, that you can beat the drums, you look at other people dancing, you learn how to dance, you make it your own style. So that was what was important. And the course convener, I gave him a wire motorbike made of wire. And for me, it represented my vulnerability. And that was what I was taking with me, that because I'm not good at asking for help, because I don't trust anybody except myself. But what I had to learn is that when you are vulnerable, it's like getting on a motorbike, you're getting on something you are so scared of, but you need to hold on to the person who is driving. You need to ask for help. And my small group conductor, I gave an African doll with a baby on its back and a basket on its head. And what I wanted to say is that I'm an African woman. I multitask. I can't just do things just thinking about me. I'm doing 700 things, because I think at some point I had to fly to Zimbabwe for 2 days to go and sort out something for 2 days. And they were saying, this is crazy. And I was saying, for you, it might sound crazy, but for me, it's not. If I don't do it, it might mean months and years of problems when I can just do it in 2 days. So it's allowing me to be me, but at the same time, also learning something.
I want.
There was only a few.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Agatha from Rwanda. I'm in a foundation course. And I want to thank MG and Justin because that is a new approach they are introducing in our country. And I have 2 sessions, but now I was thinking when I participated in this symposium, when I see how people are interacting and what is going on, I said that thank to the institution GASi and thank to MG and Justin to allow us also to be part of this group analysis. And I think the new approach will help us and it will help our country. And thank you, MG.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that I didn't really. I'm sorry that I didn't join this presentation because of internet I had. I joined when MJ was talking about context that need to be considered. I don't know whether you are. Hello?
We can't hear you very well.
We lost it. We lost a bit of what you said.
I think the internet connection is not so good. Maybe that.
MJ, I was going to ask, I teach in a school, I run groups for a school that trains pastors, and some of the people in the group have been from Rwanda and experienced the mass trauma, and they went back to work in their church. So I kind of wondered how many of the people in your training might be connected to the church somehow. And because I think some of these people I worked with, they would do well to be in your training program.
So could we, is it possible, might it help if we all mute our videos to have less data going on? So maybe Karanga can join us because he's got less data to catch.
Okay.
We seem to have lost MJ though.
Yeah.
We've lost MJ, but maybe should I just say what I wanted to ask in the meantime?
Yeah.
Maybe other people can respond, but I was just thinking about, it's Monica here from Cape Town, South Africa. I was just thinking about the idea of coming in and doing a training in a place where there's been this level of trauma.
Yeah.
And I was really interested to hear how the trauma impacted on the training, you know, to come in and do kind of 3 blocks, you know, how was that dealt with? And also, was there something about the way in which and maybe if we've got some of the Rwandan people still on with us here, how they had dealt with their trauma sufficiently to be able to undertake a training. I see MJ's back.
MJ's back.
Mm-hmm. MJ, you muted.
Was Diogen able to say what he said? You wanted to say?
Repeat the question. Sorry, MJ, were you? I was just asking about how it was to go in and do a training in a country with people with that level of trauma,
and you know, so it was a question around how you contained or worked with the trauma, given that you know you were there to do a training, and then also maybe the way in which the people had already dealt with or were dealing with the trauma, given that you weren't coming in to do an intervention so much as a training.
I think one of the things I always find helpful is that in order to understand, find yourself in the people you are going to be working with. That is the way you can connect. Is it?
Just as a reminder, it's almost the time, so just for you to bear in mind that we need to open other sessions. So it should be time to start ending the session.
Thank you, everybody. I'm really sorry about the disruptions. I think
Thanks,
my computer knows. My computer knows when I'm getting excited about something. It always crashes at that moment. But thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Session, MJ.
Inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, MJ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Later.